As I started coming across things like the quantum biology and quantum and circadian cycles, it's just some things that got a little deep. And so I wanted to have a really basic understanding, which led me to the work of Tristan Scott. He understands electricity and some of these things that seem a little bit out there, but explains it in a way that is so easy to understand. And honestly, it may be one of the most important aspects to health. All right, Tristan. Man, I'm tickled to be doing this. You in Australia is super cool, man. That's on my bucket list. But your book, Bitcoin and Beef, was the way that I actually came across you, and then your podcast and everything you're doing. So, brother, if you don't care, just give us a little introduction to who you are and kind of that passion behind what you do.
Yeah, I mean, wow, at this point it's quite a lot, but kind of started with the self-healing health journey, really. Was a college soccer player, engineering student, had one too many concussions my last year of school. Didn't know I was concussed the last one and had 12 to 15 months of post-concussive syndrome. Went to the classic neurologist in the centralized healthcare system, got no feedback that was helpful, kind of went into a pretty dark state. And then I realized that, I needed to take control of my health. This was not something a 22-year-old should be going through for the rest of their life. So kind of went down the self-healing rabbit hole, consumed so much information around health optimization, lifestyle interventions. So got really into that aspect of it. Started feeling a ton better when I made some tweaks in my lifestyle. Got really into, the diet, and then as a result, the food system. And then I moved out west. I started buying like quarter half cows with my sister in Wyoming because that's where she was living, and started getting really into regenerative agriculture. And simultaneously, I was passionate, or I was passionate. I was starting to learn more about crypto, just being at a tech school in 2017, learned about Bitcoin. And then in 2020, I guess a couple of years, I was starting to feel a lot better. I was full-time engineering during the day, and I was realizing I had these passions. I was kind of teeter-tottering. It was like Bitcoin and then health optimization. And then it clicked for me one day that I'm into these things for the same exact reason, right? Like when I was unhealthy due to my TBI, I lost all the control over my life. I was very limited on what I could do. And again, was a very active person throughout my whole life, like always doing things outdoors, sports, school, just always had a packed schedule. And then that all was very, very limited. And that feeling was just terrible. So losing that was one of the hardest things to do, but overcoming that was very empowering. And then I realized the importance of sovereignty, the importance of personal responsibility, and being in the driver's seat of your life. So that's when I made that connection. I was like, wow, I'm really passionate about kind of health optimization and Bitcoin for the same reasons. And I realized that kind of nobody was talking about this connection. Like, yeah, a lot of Bitcoiners were starting to go carnivore and things like that. I knew some people in the health space that were into Bitcoin as well. So I decided to write a book kind of connecting the food system and the monetary system, and talking about why decentralization is really the solution to individual quality of lives being robbed by the centralized corporations and government entities, and made that connection. And yeah, wrote the book Bitcoin and Beef in 2021, released it in early 2022. And since then, it's just shocking at how things have accelerated since I wrote it. And a lot of the things I kind of maybe predicted, alluded to as being very important, have only come more to the forefront since then. And as I was kind of rooted in health optimization from the beginning, since I finished up writing the second edition of my book last year, I've focused more on diving deep into the decentralized health, is what I call it, really. And that's kind of, again, getting back to what actually works, right? It's not these band-aid approaches of either medications from the centralized system or oodles of supplement from the functional medical practitioners. It's actually lifestyle habit changes that will keep you healthy for the rest of your life. But again, with that comes personal responsibility. So I'm kind of all about decentralization, started the podcast, Decentralized Radio. And it's just so rewarding, so fulfilling to talk to folks like yourself and all these industry experts that are actually putting in that proof of work to continue moving this movement forward, whether that's in the Bitcoin space, whether that's the scientists doing really important research that nobody's talking about in the health space. It's been a fun journey, and we're kind of just getting started. So really excited about it.
We are just getting started, and coming together on things like this, I think is paramount to getting the ball rolling even more. Just that snowball, so to speak. I came from it in a different way, but it does all come together, right? So like my son having cancer, having the farmer's market with the regenerative agriculture, being really big in the biohacking and just kind of that whole cause and effect, right? And nothing seemed to really make sense for me, Tristan. Like the cancer treatments, we're not winning, right? And we haven't been winning for a long time. And even though they try to spin it like we are, the food system is poisonous and killing us. The agriculture system is causing the rural America to die. And so there's all these things that come together. And like you said, it's the interest, it all comes from like this same point. So for us with Sowing Prosperity, it's, hey, what's that golden thread to create it, to bring it all together, to create that prosperity? And so that's really why I'm so tickled to be visiting with you, because you have brought it together. And that book, your book, Bitcoin and Beef, is it just speaks, to the soul of anybody in this space. So tell me about that decentralization and what that really means to you. I think that the term that I typically use is localization, and I think that might be the same thing. But if you don't care, go into that.
Yeah, I mean, decentralization, it has become like a hot word for sure. And sometimes I think it's used in the wrong context. But the way I think about it, I think about it in terms of like pillars of like what it actually means. And I sprinkled that in a little bit in that first response I gave. It encompasses personal responsibility. It encompasses putting in proof of work. It encompasses not having this centralized authority being in charge of it. So it's inherently, instead of like a food system, it's like a food web, right? It's not a top-down approach. It's very single layered or very flat in terms of the structure, because it's at that individual level or that local level. And localism is a huge aspect, I think, of decentralization and getting back to the local community, local economy. Those things are all tied into decentralization. And then what does that provide? It provides resilience. It provides security, from a food perspective, from an economical perspective, and then it provides you the ability to be in control, to be in the driver's seat of that venture, that business, that aspect, whether it's money, whether it's food, whether it's your health. And because of that, it does come with increased responsibility, but ultimately you're not relying on someone else for the outcome of whatever you're putting into it. So over the past 100 years, we've continuously traded convenience for quality. And it's really a shame, because now you kind of have to be a jack of all trades to be really sovereign and just in a high level state in all assets or aspects of your life. Like maybe 150 years ago, you could just save money. You could just, trust that a doctor is going to help you out in a healing journey. You could just go to 150 years ago, you'd just be buying your food locally anyway. So it was ingrained in the system. It wasn't, you had to go out of your way. People just woke up at sunrise and worked. We didn't have to tell them, hey, you should go watch the sunrise and get morning light into your eyes because it's beneficial for your health. That's just what people did. And now that's, again, everything is completely changed. Society has advanced tremendously from a technological perspective, and modern conveniences, although they're tremendous for things and opportunities like this, have really flipped the way we live our daily lives upside down. And as a result of that, and as a result of greed and a broken monetary system, we now have the profitization, the monetization of everything, and squeezing the last penny out of every member of society to keep fueling this broken system, propping it up until it eventually collapses. But overall, yeah, decentralization and localism go hand in hand, and that's one of the biggest aspects of it that I preach. And I think it's one of the easiest ways to think about it too.
The visualization that kind of comes to me with anytime I'm talking about centralization and this globalization is almost like this. There's this straw, and the straw has all these little tentacle things that go out, and there's just like this one person sitting there, and it's just taken away from rural America. It's taken away from healthcare. It's just like this all. It all gets taken away, and it's like just withers up and dies. Like for us in Arkansas, eastern and southern Arkansas, the Delta, the ag areas, they're drying up. It's depressing to just even drive through there. It's all monocrop land and then boarded up once thriving communities. And it's terrible. And it's because it's almost just been raped and pillaged to the degree it's just degraded. And so how do you see the financial system with what Bitcoiners and the crypto enthusiasts kind of say in the positive way versus this fiat system that we're all involved in?
Yeah, I mean, overall, when we went, this has been, I guess, a progression that's been happening since 1913, since the Federal Reserve was created, and they kind of separated that monetary responsibility into a whole different authority that's kind of a private company, kind of a federal organization. It's this very strange, and if you go and read The Creature of Jekyll Island, it's probably the best background on that, and that kind of scheme that to create the Federal Reserve. But since then, we've just been on this journey of inevitable fiat currency, and that fully happened in 1971 by going off the gold standard, and then a subsequent decade of stagflation, raising interest rates extremely high, and to bring that down, and then it's the result of all these irresponsible monetary decisions, which comes with government intervention, right? If things go bad, intervening via the Keynesian economic school of thought is that when things go bad, you intervene to help drum up some more economic momentum, when really you should let things play out. You should let companies fail that are over leveraged, that are not actually running a prosperous business model. Instead, you're bailing them out and giving them a free pass, as well as allowing the Ponzi scheme of a banking system that we have, when you can lend out 10x for every dollar you actually have. And if everyone went to pull out their money from the bank, we would have a bank run immediately, and all the banks would fail. So the debt bubble, the debt cycle that's come of that is astronomical. $34 trillion of debt currently, $900 billion to just pay the interest rate of our debt in 2023. That's bigger than all of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's like $650 billion. So it's just been this progression. And as we get, further along to 2023, these oscillations, the amplitudes have become more severe and they become tighter. So these large events will continue to happen more often. So 2008, 2009 was obviously extremely important in that aspect because the interest rates were held extremely low since then. Then COVID happened right as we were kind of going to go into an economic slowdown, and they decided to expand the balance sheet, the US dollar amount of money in circulation by 30-40% of all US dollars being created in that period. And of course, what's that going to result in? Extreme inflation. And now we've seen them rising or raising the interest rates to try and holding them to try and get some credibility back. And I'm not an economics expert. I'm not an analyst for, a hedge fund or a Bitcoin trading company, things like that. I've interviewed a bunch of these people as well, but to me, like fundamentally, the money is broken, and you see that in every other industry. You see that in agriculture, right? In 1971. Secretary of Ag Earl Butz, like huge inflection point there, and his whole motto is "Go big or go home," and he really created the exports of U.S. crops internationally, and then forced all these farmers in the Midwest to start growing as much corn and soy as they can. He just wanted to scale it up, and this misnomer of feeding the world in the mid 20th century as well accelerated into that, and eventually it was unsustainable. It went bust. And then we have all these subsidies to rescue farmers now as a result of that. And also another consolidation event where only the people with a lot of money can kind of stay in the game. And that's continued to happen. And now we have, plant-based foods. We just have so many processed foods. Why? Because it's scalable. You make more profits and you can market it extremely heavily. They're very shelf stable. So even though they're nutrient devoid completely and they're not real food, that's just how these companies are able to make more money. And it's all back to this short-term thinking, right? All these decisions made at a political level, at a company, conglomerate level, it's all very short-term. How do we increase profits in the short term to keep up with this expanding money supply that's devaluing in purchasing power by the day? So it's all tied together, and it's really every industry just trying to keep up profits and make double-digit % revenue gains year on year, because they have to, or else their investors are going to go elsewhere. And then because of that free money from the debt, you could just borrow at basically zero interest, 1%, 2% interest. None of these come Beyond Me, Oatly, like all these BS companies, they wouldn't exist if we had real interest rates. Like nobody would fund that. But because money is so free, so easy to borrow, they're able to create this nonsense, spend 100 million on marketing, and still fail. If you look at their stock prices now, which is fantastic. It shows that the consumers do have some sway on what happens. And I talk about often, I think the consumer purchasing dollar is probably the most powerful say that the individual has in society. It's way more influential than actually the vote you cast at the ballot box if you do that. I think maybe locally you do have some more influence, but in talking like presidential, Senate elections, I think your day-to-day purchasing power decisions you make is more influential than the votes you cast.
How do we utilize the future, this decentralized monetary system, to build out these local economies? Then how does one get to the point that we participate? Because I've not seen anything outside of dollar transactions really going on. So how do we get there, Tristan?
Yeah, and talking about Bitcoin and why, it's better as a form of money, and just quickly, it's program scarcity. It has a fixed supply. You can't print more. It has this decaying issuance structure where every 4 years, roughly, the amount that gets released into circulation on a 10-minute daily basis is cut in half. The next halving or halvening is occurring in April of next year. So that's coming up as well. And then, fundamentally, it's, that program scarcity. It's native to the internet. It's totally peer-to-peer, so you don't need the centralized banking system to use it. We could just interact directly, and it's using the network to verify these transactions via proof of work by having this computational hardware, the mining component of it, which is utilizing energy to verify the network and secure the network, which is just like a brilliant way that Satoshi structured this when he first came up with this idea almost 15 years ago now. And how do we get there? So it is definitely nascent. We're early. It's 15 years in. It's not used a ton for daily transactions, and there's some limitations just using on chain. It's very slow. It takes 10 minutes to confirm. That's way too slow if you're going to buy like some beef from someone at the farmer's market or a coffee. And then, they created a second layer solution. It's called the Lightning Network, and you can pay someone instantaneously, and that's kind of like a second channel coming off the main chain, but you can't use it for like really, really large sums of money. Like if you wanted to send someone $5,000, you wouldn't use that. But again, for daily transactions, like I sold bison at farmers markets in Wyoming, and I accepted Bitcoin. And although only like two people paid me, and one of them was my friend, it's doable. Like it's really just growing the circular economy aspect of it, and we're still very, very early. Like most people in the US still, they might own like a tiny bit of Bitcoin, but they don't really like, they don't own it. Actually, they don't hold the private keys. It's probably just on Coinbase or Robinhood or somewhere. They don't really know how it works. They think of it just as like an investment that's going to go up. So it's not really money in the US. Whereas in other countries like Argentina, Venezuela, Nigeria, Turkey, inflation's 50+%. Like these people are actually utilizing Bitcoin for what it was meant to be. And they're utilizing other cryptos, mostly the stable coins like USDT or USC. Stable coins, but there it's actually relevant completely as money because their fiat currency is unraveling. And here in the US, we have this luxury that we have the most sound fiat currency in the world. And there's a lot of theories that as we continue to debase the dollar, every other fiat currency, and you've already seen this with the pound and the Australian dollar too, are going to just accelerate faster in their unraveling than the US dollar, which is a shame because we're basically, putting a lot of stress on other nations just by being involved with us as the global reserve currency. So for me, how do we grow this? It's continuing to just preach the fundamentals of Bitcoin, continue to be open to accepting it, just having a sign at a farmer's market. For me, I got hundreds of questions. Oh, you accept Bitcoin? Wow. It's everything from, oh, you must be rich to, oh, that thing's going to zero to you're an idiot to, oh, that's really fascinating. Oh, I'm going to buy your book to learn more. So that was really cool. And then if you're a consumer and you value Bitcoin and you want to grow this movement, then you should just go up to people at farmers markets and be like, hey, do you accept Bitcoin? They'll be like, what? What are you talking about? That's like a scam, or no, that's way too complicated. But if 10 people do that in like a span of 2 months or 2 weeks, they might be like, hey, maybe this is something I should look into more. So you're kind of just planting seeds everywhere you go. And eventually everybody's going to come on board because pretty much everyone's already on board that the US dollar and the monetary system is very broken. Like people have been convinced the past 3 years. They're awake to that reality, but they're not awake to the reality that Bitcoin is a very sound solution for the world that we live in. And it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. So being a part of that education and being a part of that, just nudging people in that direction can make a big difference.
I think that I need to, as a business owner, look at doing exactly what you just said and just have participate, right? Like, I mean, just participate. Why do you think the Bitcoin community is embracing more of this meat-based diet or even carnivore?
Yeah, I mean, this goes with anything, right? And to me, it's just like I told you, once I realized that I was passionate about these topics for the same reason, it's kind of like when you just put on a pair of glasses and you look at the world through this different perspective. To me, there's no going back, and it's inevitable, right? If you heal yourself from a health issue by going carnivore or making some radical change that's out of the norm from what like a traditional doctor would recommend, you're going to be skeptical about everything. Then you're like, oh wait, they told me red meat was bad for me. They told me that I need to be consuming less saturated fat. And then I did the opposite of what they say. I'm getting sunlight. I'm eating red meat. I feel better than ever. What else is wrong that they've told me? Oh, the media paints this evil picture around Bitcoin, around so many things now, like exercise is right wing, I think was a hilarious article title at some point. But in general, or, things that are safe. Oh, there's nothing wrong with GMO crops or the use of herbicides, or these things are perfectly safe as long as you're below this EPA exposure limit. Tap water. The New York City mayor is making campaigns around drinking tap water that contains 25 plus different carcinogens and toxins that, like, are you serious? Is this real life? So there's so much of that ongoing that for me, it's almost been like easier than ever to bring people over, because all they need is an open mind to consider this. And Bitcoiners, they already have that, right? They already have this, large leap they made in terms of the money and the financial perspective. So telling them that seed oils are bad for them and that red meat is good for you is a pretty easy thought to provoke. And yeah, it's kind of taken hold. And guess what? The truth resonates. And this is something that's a foundational principle of Bitcoin and decentralization, is the truth will always resonate, especially today where, it's harder to suppress things. It's easier to muddy the waters because there's so much information out there, but the truth is out there. You just need to find it. Whereas, the information was very, very curated for a long time before the age of the internet. So it's just a matter of time, and you have that open-minded perspective to consider the alternative. And then guess what? Any really open-minded person would be like, hey, this carnivore thing, or just eating more red meat, or eating local real foods instead of processed foods, seems to be working for a lot of people. I'm going to try it out for 3 months, see how I feel. Then they see it working. And then that's truth right there. That's you putting in that personal responsibility. I'm going to try this. I'm not going to form opinions and conclusions from other people. I'm going to actually just do it myself and come up with my own conclusion. And that's what I'm big on as well. I love taking opinions, taking feedback from different perspectives. But at the end of the day, you need to come up with your own opinion, because that's something that can still happen very, very easily in the carnivore community, in the Bitcoin space. I mean, there's sheep everywhere, but you need to maintain that, hey, I'm trying to keep this holistic, just non-dogmatic view, be very objective about everything, if you really want to be decentralized. But of course, if you get in a space where pretty much everyone has put in that work of vetting things out, it's a lot easier to kind of go along with inspiration from others.
Absolutely. I've gotten to the point to where I feel like there's so much information out there, Tristan, that you get kind of tripped up on, like, what direction do you go in, and what you can't, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And so for me, that one thing that I have settled on, that I have control and I can do, is to eat local, regeneratively raised meat. I think if there's only one thing you can do, it's that. It's support those local farmers that are doing things, in the way that's making things better. And so that's what we've been trying to do, is facilitate that through the market. How do we do a better job selling meat? How do we do a better job marketing? How do we do a better job educating? And so how have you come to the conclusion that the regenerative makes sense and is a solution?
Yeah, and it really goes back to something I think about of every topic, every decision, whether it's health, whether it's food, whether it's agriculture. What really, like, step back from 2023 perspective, step back from the noise of the debates, and just think contextually, like, what actually makes sense. You're in Arkansas, if I'm in Wyoming, like, what would have naturally occurred here before humans or before industrialization? And obviously nature is naturally regenerative. It's naturally not taking too much, and it's having long rest periods, and it's foundationally very biodiverse. Life is proliferating in healthy ecosystems. So all the aspects of regenerative agriculture, all it's trying to do is emulate nature, whether that's via rotational grazing, whether that's multi-species cover crops, long rest periods, having the right breed for the right environment, restoring natural native large ruminant like the bison, and bringing back kind of other animal species or bugs or any other biodiverse organisms that are going to contribute to that. That's all regenerating the land in a way that nature would have intended. And nature is the really true decentralized system that exists, right? It is 100% resilient in a local manner when things are going correct. And that doesn't mean it doesn't have these boom bust periods. Like, that happens for a reason. Forest fires happen for a reason because, there's overgrowth and it's too dense, and that's not contributing to the long-term success of that area. So naturally there would be forest fires, it would cleanse, then all these nutrients get upcycled into the soil. Like, these things are all designed to occur for a reason. And it's the same thing with our biology, right? Like, we are designed to thrive in a specific environment, in our local environment as well. Like, our body is meant to be in tune with where you're standing in the world, at what time, at what season. So the best thing I think you can do is the same thing that you just said, is eat hyper local and embrace your local environment, because that's what nature would have done. That's what humans would have done for the majority of existence. I mean, yeah, there's some large farming going on, like starting 10,000 years ago, but humans were around for a lot longer than that. And really, it's all hyper local because whatever was there was what was available. And then again, you want to build resilience. Like, community is huge, and you want to build resilience in your community, in your systems that you're immersed in, because that's what you have control over. So another aspect of decentralization that kind of stems from a lot of Bitcoiners as well is, don't trust, verify. How can you verify what's coming from the grocery store? A lot of times the farms aren't even listed. The meat could be just, it could say, made in the US or raised in the US, and that could not even be true. It could be repackaged, or it could be from, a ranch that's saying, oh, it's grass-fed, but grass-fed, if it's not 100% grass-fed, grass-finished, and then was it regenerative? Is it pasture-raised? There's so much greenwashing, so much like marketing scheming going on. How can you verify? And the answer is, you really can't. I mean, some of these brands have social medias and you can get a better idea. There are good options at the grocery store, but the best option is to go in person to a local producer, verify, ask them questions, look at the soil, look at what they're growing, look at the health of the animals. That is how you can actually verify the quality of the operation. And then you're building a relationship with that person. And that, to me, is invaluable. And you can't quantify that via any data. That if you eat something from your local environment, getting that from someone that you care about and put faith in, it's going to be better for you overall. And if you see the health of the animal, we now know through some research is that a healthier animal raised in a way that's more indicative to natural grazing and raising styles is actually more nutrient dense for us. No coincidence. I didn't need any data to prove that, but now we do have it, right? It makes sense. It's logical sense. So that's how I think about it. And I think, yeah, it's almost the number one recommendation. Eat locally, just get involved locally with your community from a food perspective, from your own health perspective. Just embrace it.
Hey man, I love that. We've visited with Bill Schindler and Sally Fallon Morell, and that ancestral diet, the ancestral way of eating is, it's massive. And then you hit on, some of these health experts like Jordan Rubin that really, really embrace this agricultural aspect on regenerative. And, there's just so many resources and so many just incredible people out there that we can learn from that are actually doing it. They're not just theorizing, right? They're putting the proof of work. They're doing it.
Yep.
All right. I want to shift gears on almost like this second part with you, because we've got Dr. Jack Cruz coming up, and I'm not mentally ready for him. He's a lot. He's very excited to have him on. But I want to go into this circadian biology, this quantum biology aspect, just kind of on that basic level, and get us into understanding that. That way, I can better understand the biohacking side of it, right? Like with, cancer is my primary focus, but it's all tied together.
Yeah, well, that's exciting. He's going to be a really great conversation. He just did a podcast with RFK that I think came out today. So it's great to see this kind of becoming mainstream because, again, tying back to what we've already talked about, it's really about embracing your local environment, embracing the season, embracing the natural inputs from that environment that would have existed. And what does that mean? That means the light, right? Like artificial light is a relatively new phenomenon in human history that would have never existed. And especially the LEDs, the fluorescence we have now is completely different from the incandescence that existed 100 years ago. And then that is completely different from just fire from candles and fires. And that's all we had for, the existence of modern society. So we've really made a drastic change in our light environment. And then we're indoors all the time. We are designed to be in the sun. The sun, I was just doing some calculations, and there's so many cool research papers. The sun has it's a full spectrum of light, right? So that's why artificial light is artificial, because even though it has blue light and the sun has blue light, the sun is never present without red and infrared light. So you're creating this artificial light environment when you're just indoors under fluorescence. And your listeners might be familiar that things like blue light are really bad for sleep because it's shutting off melatonin production, because after the sun sets, there is no light present in nature. It's dark. And in the winter, or times where northern latitudes, for example, that's earlier. So your body's going to be ramping up melatonin production. There's going to be less UV. So there's going to be a lot of seasonal changes going on. So that's what you need to kind of tap into. And again, it comes all down to this decentralized health model where the best things for our health are free. They're accessible to everyone, but they're kind of challenging to embrace in a modern lifestyle. If you go work a 9 to 5 in an office, artificial light everywhere, you're not connected to that. You're not connected to the earth. Before insulative footwear became a thing, we were always grounded. We were always connected to the earth via bare feet, or leather, animal hide, skinned footwear. So that's something that's important, because that's another input, and grounding has been shown to regulate circadian rhythm, or your body clock as well, improve, inflammatory conditions, because it's providing an input of free electrons to our body as well. So most people get hung up on the food aspect of health, diet and exercise. Like, you get these two in check and you're golden. And that was the case until we really completely changed everything in our environment outside of that. And obviously the food is completely garbage now from, the average level, but there's even more to it. And that's what a lot of people kind of forget to recognize. But a lot of guys who are embracing like a carnivore, more ancestral diet, they're also getting outside in the sunlight a lot more. And they're almost not even realizing how beneficial that is. And like I was saying, I was doing some research yesterday, and the amount of energy we can absorb from the sun is on the magnitude of like a 100 to 1,000x of the energy we absorb from food. So really, nobody's considering that. But why has nobody ever talked about that? Why is the mainstream media telling us that sun is bad, lather up in sunscreen? It's because it's really free, really accessible for anyone. And even if you just 2, 3, 4x your sun exposure, you're going to have a tremendous impact positively on your health. So circadian biology in general is really just about tapping in to the natural circadian rhythms that your body is designed to thrive on. It's all about timing. Sleep-wake cycles, sleep in general is so important, because that's where we are restoring. That's where we're repairing all our cells. So all these toxins we're exposed to now is even more important to have that restorative sleep. And if we have blue light at night, if we have, we're just getting blasted with stimulants or loud noises, or going to bed at 2 a.m. instead of 10 p.m. and having different sleep cycles, as well as, I talk a lot about electromagnetic fields from technology. So if we have our phone right next to our head when we are sleeping, that's all impacting sleep quality. And then you're not getting as much restoration, cell repair. So those toxins, they're going to catch up to you a lot faster than they would have, say, 50 years ago. So that's why we're seeing things like chronic disease in people younger and younger and younger. And in my opinion, that's the scariest component of it. And it's only going to get worse if we don't address it.
It, it's we're not getting better, right? And I think that's part of what's waking everybody up. But none of this that you're talking about is necessarily new, right? Like Becker has been, that's not new. His, body electric, the work that's out there, that is,
Yep.
it's there. And with the artificial world we live in, it just really something that's just coming up more and more to get my attention. We've talked to Thomas Seyfried, and he's got the metabolic approach to cancer, and that's kind of his claim to fame. And with that, Tristan, what I have come to fully believe, and I want your input on this, is that the diseases come from a combination of toxicity and deficiency, right? And that's what destroys the mitochondrial function. And with that happening, the part that we're not looking at is what you just went through in this circadian rhythm that we're in. But his work ended up leading me to Russell Ryder. So Dr. Ryder's like the melatonin expert.
That's who energy thing was what I was citing was from Ryder's paper.
Was Dr.
So
Ryder.
he's fantastic.
So he's incredible. And he just he sent me a paper where it was using melatonin with metastatic cancer and just getting incredible results. And this is like July of this year. I think you would love that paper. But I sent that to Dr. Seyfried too. And we're trying to get a study going on melatonin and cancer. But I know that Dr. Cruz is anti-supplementing with melatonin. Do you have any thoughts with this? And tell me if you disagree with the toxicity deficiency aspect that I believe is the contributor to disease.
Yeah, well, what you said after that, the mitochondrial dysfunction for sure, I think is that is the real root cause of chronic disease. And what contributes to that is many things, right? Yeah, it is the external toxins. It is, the lack of connection, the very dismal circadian biology and deficiency in nutrients, or just it's the wrong input signal. So I'm an engineer. I think of everything like a system, right? The mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. Like that's known. That is biology 101. Yet they spend no money researching this. They only spend it on the nuclear genome. Why? Because they can make way more pharmaceutical solutions for that. But if you have a system, you have inputs and you have outputs. The output here is energy, whether that's through ATP, it's also through metabolic water that's produced. And you could talk about the water collagen communication matrix, which is also important. So signaling in the cells is extremely important. Most people don't know that the mitochondria are also responsible for a tremendous amount of signaling going on. It's this communication hub. So you have a system that's important for communication, important for energy production, and then you're getting the wrong inputs. You're having artificial light, you're having diet that's either it's garbage, it's not in season, it's devoid of nutrient. You have other toxins like EMFs, whatever carcinogen you want to name, glyphosate, herbicides. So your output, it's going to be compromised. And eventually that system, it's not going to have enough energy to function. And you're going to get mitochondrial dysfunction. And that might just be in one tissue area. What tissues have the most mitochondrial density? Your heart, your brain, your liver, reproductive organs are very, energy intensive processes to produce things like sperm and eggs. It's those types of organs that are really getting hit with mitochondrial dysfunction. And that can take years because it's a rate. It's like, all right, if I'm 25 living a pretty terrible lifestyle, maybe 20% dysfunction, by the time you're 35, that could be 50. And then, I have now these chronic diseases showing their face. So 100% aligned there. But again, what does melatonin do? Most people think of melatonin as, something that's just produced by the pineal gland. That's, the hormone of darkness, so we can go to sleep. Yeah, that's true. But what Dr. Russell Ryder and Scott Zimmerman have been researching that's so fantastic is that we now know that the mitochondria are using melatonin to basically dictate so many functions. They're kind of like the composer of the melatonin, dictating autophagy, cell cleanup, apoptosis, programmed cell death. If a mitochondria is dysfunctional, they want to kill it. They want to clean it up, get it out of there so it's not causing issues. not causing improper output signals, and mitochondrial fusion and fission, all these other things going on. And what's stimulating mitochondria to produce melatonin? Near infrared light. Near infrared light is coming from the sun. 50% of the sun is infrared. That would have been our natural input signal, and that's helping us restore and repair all the damage throughout the day. And of course, that's ongoing as well in other areas of our body. So I agree 100% that melatonin is so under discussed, undervalued, and that's why I love what those guys are doing. But then, yeah, because of all that, it's been proven to be anti-cancer. That I'm sure you know very well. So then everyone in the biohacking space is kind of like, well, let's just supplement with 100 milligrams of melatonin, and that's, an easy way to do it. And there's a lot of problems with that, in fact, because synthetic melatonin is not equivalent to the melatonin that we produce in our body. The pineal gland's only producing like 100 to 300 micrograms of melatonin per night. That is nothing. That's a third to a tenth of a milligram. And a lot of these, dosages are 5 to 10. Ben Greenfield's doing like 50 milligrams suppositories or whatever. It's kind of crazy. So that's a problem. They have other ingredients that aren't listed on the labels. The regulation around supplements is abysmal at best. And that's why, melatonin supplementation in most of the rest of the world, in the EU, I think here in Australia, it's actually not allowed. Like, you can't buy melatonin over the counter because they know how powerful it is. So that's an issue. Actually, someone just sent me a direct message the other day that they came up with this phytomelatonin that's a lot better quality. I'll have to send you their contact information and a paper they wrote, which was really good. But they agreed, and I asked them, I said, hey, I'm not actually a fan of melatonin supplementation unless I'm traveling like drastic time zones. And even then, I might just take a nibble of like half a milligram, like a tiny bit, to just help transition. But I want to focus, and why I don't like supplements at a high level is because they're a band-aid approach. They're a short-term solution to improving your condition. They're not fundamentally changing the foundational issues, which is rooted in your circadian biology, in your connection to your local environment, which is really causing the mitochondrial dysfunction and mitigating the toxins that come with living in that environment. So but again, if you have cancer, that's an extreme situation that you're in, right? So that could definitely warrant taking melatonin as a medicine, right, at that point. But again, the form of it, the dosing, the quality would be really important to control. So, and I think Jack has said that as well. He's like, if you're going to take melatonin, very short periods of time, I think in the beginning he would say like never take it for more than a few weeks. But for me, it's like, as a healthy 27-year-old, I almost would never take it for more than just like a very one-off occasion. And even then, I've been pretty much not taking it at all, because if you're using it to fall asleep, you're not addressing the issue of your sleep. Why are you not falling asleep? Do you have hormonal issues stimulated to just a lack of connection to your environment, your circadian biology? You're on screens all night. You're drinking way too much caffeine. It could be a million reasons. You're not addressing the root cause. So that's kind of my thoughts, but man, it's so exciting, the melatonin relationship and how it's seasonal, as I mentioned. Seasonality, Wyoming, winter, it's dark, it's cold. You're going to be producing more melatonin. Summer, high UV, actually, you're going to be producing more vitamin D. And that paper I'll send you is kind of talking about the vitamin D melatonin relationship, hormone of light, hormone of dark, and they actually the melatonin can bind to vitamin D receptors, which is kind of a new uncovering. It's just so exciting. But, 200 years ago, you didn't have to tell people to do that. They went to sleep after the sunrise, maybe had some candles around. They woke up at or sunset. They woke up at sunrise because that's when they had to put in the work. That's when the light was available. Now, it's all a mess. So we need to be deliberate about changing it.
Absolutely. No, I love that answer. I think that for anybody with cancer, it's honestly a no-brainer. It's something they should absolutely be looking into and considering. But I think it's that toxic world. I think the Band-Aid, you're spot on, but it is also something that I think helps get us through. I do think that it's a tool. So John Lawrence, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Lawrence. He would be a great guest for you on the podcast too, I think. But he's huge on melatonin, right? And I think he's the one that got Benfield, Ben Greenfield doing it too. But another one that he has been big on is methylene blue. And I know that you're familiar with methylene blue. And so had a friend come by the market not too long ago with a concussion, and she was really, really struggling. And I actually gave her methylene blue and sent her your podcast where y'all broke down the concussion protocol with it. And she texted me the other day and said it saved her life. So I think that that's worth us discussing a little bit. What is methylene blue? Is it used for, and why is it having that big of an impact?
Yeah, that's so funny too, because my girlfriend's sister here yesterday had a little concussion. I was like, yeah, you should give her some methylene blue after a couple of days, and she's on the same page as me as well too. So I wish I had methylene blue when I had my concussions 5 years ago. Actually, that would have been nice, but. Yeah, what is it? Oh, it's such a fascinating compound, right? And it's one of those few compounds, it is of synthetic origin. It's actually the first synthetic medicinal compound that was ever used to treat malaria. So it was invented as like a chemical dye by the textile industry in the 1870s. And 15 years later, so they were testing all of these dyes, all these compounds for use against parasitic infections like malaria. So it was discovered that it was really beneficial in treating malaria, and it's been used to treat malaria for the past 140 years now, or 30 years. So it's one of the most studied compounds. It's one of the most efficacious. It's on the WHO's list of essential medicines, and that's because it's one of the only known treatments for carbon monoxide, arsenic poisoning, which induces methemoglobinemia, which is changing the state of iron to not be able to effectively carry oxygen to the final position in the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. And that's something that methylene blue is really effective at, is improving mitochondrial dysfunction, because most people understand that antioxidants are good for your health, and that's a huge debate in and of itself whether they're actually functional from the petri dish to in real life. But methylene blue is very, very effective as an antioxidant. And what an antioxidant is it's just donating electrons to free radicals produced from an inefficient mitochondrial process. So molecules like oxygen don't like to have unpaired electrons, so they're going to go and try and steal it from somewhere else. And where they're going to steal it from is usually upwards in the electron transport chain earlier on from these respiratory proteins, and then that's going to cause more inefficiencies and then more damaging free radicals to be produced if they are not quenched by either natural antioxidants. So melatonin, one of those. Melatonin actually probably the best antioxidant, because it has this cascading effect where melatonin will donate an electron, and then that molecule that's produced from melatonin losing electron can donate an electron, and then the third form can donate an electron, and then the fourth form can also donate an electron. So it's like 4x molecules of antioxidants. Fantastic. So methylene blue does the same thing, but what's cool about methylene blue is it can actually act as an electron donor or acceptor. So it can shuttle electrons around the mitochondria, around the cell where it's needed most. So it's just fantastic at improving mitochondrial dysfunction. It's fantastic in those kind of hypoxic environments, or when you have some toxicity. And what people don't understand is when you sustain injury like a TBI or a concussion, like the mitochondria are going to be compromised because there was some damage there. And energy is the most important thing. Having functioning mitochondria is so important for healing. So that's why methylene blue is a fantastic intervention. And there is strong research, most of this coming from Dr. Gonzalez Lima, I believe at UT Austin or Texas A&M. I don't remember, but fantastic research on methylene blue for brain health, brain injuries. And also he pairs it with photobiomodulation, which is near infrared light. So that's also near infrared light is also fantastic for mitochondrial health. As I kind of mentioned earlier, the importance of getting sunlight. So that's why then you see methylene blue. Oh, it's anti-parasitic, it's anti-malaria, it's anti-COVID, it's anti-inflammatory, it's all these things. It's because how it acts in our mitochondria, and it's a strong electron donor and acceptor. So it's continuously oxidizing and reducing molecules as needed. However, there is some debate whether it's very efficacious if you don't need it. If your mitochondrial, say, are functioning just fine, then it might be doing more harm than good. And I had this whole rebuttal on my podcast, my YouTube channel on this. And my thought is that almost nobody has like perfect mitochondria. But again, it's a supplement. Do I take it every day? No, I don't. It also has, other side effects such as causing a small amount of serotonin buildup. So if you're on SSRIs, you should definitely not take it or be very skeptical about it. But compared to traditional medical interventions, we're talking antidepressants, we're talking, amphetamines or any other, painkillers, anything. Methylene blue is a million times better option. But why does the centralized system never talk about it? Because it's been around for 150 years. They can't patent it in its original form, so they can't make money off of it. And it's really cheap. My buddy Vance started Meraki Medicinal, and yeah, he sent me like a couple bottles, and it's gonna last me like 5 years because I only take it when I'm traveling or when I have some, inflammatory state. Maybe when I'm hiking hypoxic environments at like 12,000 feet, it's good for recovery from that or in the moment. So yeah, it's a great tool to have. I think everyone should get educated on it, and I think everyone should have some at hand for moments like a concussion or moments of travel, or if you're not sleeping like at all. It can be very helpful at mitigating the oxidative stress that's produced from those type of situations.
Love it. I'm a big fan of methylene blue, and I agree with you. I know that what was it? Chris Masterjohn came out with a
Yeah,
big
yeah.
negative thing lately on that, but no, I think that very few, if anybody, have perfect mitochondria, and so it's probably going to benefit way more people than not. Tristan, man, thank you for the time. Appreciate all your knowledge and sharing, and it is. Man, it is a relief to know there are this many of us in this community fighting, bringing it together, trying to just make a positive change. And so, where can we send everybody to find out more about you and your work, and what's next?
Yeah. So, well, I guess, I've kind of been focusing on just health consulting. So, on the health optimization side of things, after going through my self-healing journey for 4 years, it's really empowering to share that with folks now who need to heal or are trying to get an optimal state of health. So, shortcutting to what information matters and what actually works, right? Because there's so many clients that come to me, they're like, oh, this guy put me on 20 supplements and like this routine, and it didn't really work. And that's why I'm big on this. We talked about some supplements. They're fantastic interventions, but everything I talked about before that, the lifestyle habits, that's going to make the foundational change. So what I do is, if I say recommend methylene blue, it's to bridge that gap, to get a kickstart in your healing journey. But you shouldn't have to take methylene blue for the rest of your life unless you actually have a severe medical condition from birth, perhaps. And that's what it's all about. It's building resilience and then empowering through education, right? There's so much wrong with the current healthcare system. They're just telling you what to do. They're not actually educating you. So how are you going to be knowledgeable enough to sustain an optimal state of health for the rest of your life? So that's what I focus on. And then because I have an electrical engineering background, really focusing in on EMFs. So I'm building a course right now and talk a lot about that on my Twitter, which is at Bitcoin and _beef. So that's where I'm most active. but also on Instagram at Tristan_health. My website is tristanhealth.com, where I have my story, kind of my background and what I preach, which you got a taste of here, and have a newsletter you can sign up for to stay up to date. And then, as you mentioned, our Decentralized Radio podcast is everywhere and talking a lot about similar things: Bitcoin, health optimization, homesteading. I want to get some hunting folks on there. Really, anything decentralized. Well, we'll have to get you on there, Logan. Actually, that'd be fantastic to hear your story, your journey into this, because that's what it's all about. And it's so grateful. I'm so grateful to connect with more like-minded individuals where the momentum's only building. We're gonna win, and I'm really psyched about it. It's a great time to be alive and spread this message.
Amen, buddy. I love it. Love it so much. Definitely check it out. It's a great podcast. I'm up to date. I've listened to all of it. Keep putting in the work, and we will visit soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us on Sowing Prosperity. Be sure to follow along across the social media platforms, including YouTube, and be sure to go to sowingprosperity.com.